Good afternoon. Okay, I'm Laura Mugeha. Thank you so much for coming. So we're having a side event and you're talking about the role of geospatial data in the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm Laura Mugeha. I'm a student from Nairobi, Kenya, pursuing an undergraduate in geomatics engineering and geospatial information systems. So I'm also a chapter lead and coordinator for a Youth Mappers chapter in Nairobi, Kenya for the university. And I'm passionate about GIS and technology and how we can use all this to solve social economic problems, especially in third world countries. So first we'll just go through what the SDGs are, just an introduction. So initially in the year 2000 several world leaders came up to create the Millennium Declaration, and this came up with the 8 MDGs with a wide range of steps, and its main goal was to eradicate poverty. So the 8 goals were from 1 to 8, which is basically eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, to achieve universal primary education, promote gender equality, reducing child mortality, improving maternal health, combating HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other diseases, then ensuring environmental sustainability and global partnership for development. So according to statistics by the UN in the year 2015, because the MDGs had a timeline of 15 years, that is from 2000 to 2015, it helped to lift actually a lot of people out of extreme poverty. But then a lot of people were left behind in such a way that, yes, development was sort of achieved, but then in third world countries or in rural areas, people were still having the same problems. For example, for the first Millennial Development Goals, there are still people who lacked access to basic services and the basic needs such as food, shelter, water, and the people who are still suffering in poverty and lack of shelter and the likes. And say for the second MDG, there are still a lot of children, especially in third world countries, who are not able to attend school. And for those who attended schools, maybe the quality of education was not comparable to the other schools. And for the third one, gender inequality still persists. Even in 2018, there's still so many cases of gender inequality. Then also for the second Millennial Development Goals, the child mortality rate was still high in some regions, still especially around the third world countries. And maternal mortality was also still high due to lack of basic health services. Also, the rates of HIV and actually malaria and other diseases were also seemed to rise, and also there were new attacks of certain diseases such as Ebola and the rest, especially still in developing countries. And on environmental conservation and the likes, there's still a lot. Actually, the level of carbon dioxide emissions increased even as compared to the year 2000 when the MDGs were formed. So then they came up with the Sustainable Development Goals in the year 2015, so as to fill the gaps that were being left by the MDGs. So with the SDGs as compared to the MDGs, there are now 17 goals as opposed to the 8 Millennial Development Goals with 169 targets. So as explained earlier, the SDGs are supposed to ensure now that come the year 2030, we'll have a universal attainment of development, as opposed to the MDGs where some countries are sort of left behind, especially third world countries and other developing nations. So how does geoinformation come into all this? So this quote, I really don't know where it came from, but it says that all problems are location-based, Therefore, all solutions must be location-specific. This is just to say that actually a problem of, say, access to water in, say, a rural area in Japan is not similar to a water problem in Africa. Maybe in one region, it's access to, say, clean water, and in another region, it's totally getting access to that water. So we have to design along while basing the same on location, because one of the reasons why maybe the Millennial Development Goals were not achieved because we're trying to create one solution for the entire world, and yet that's not possible. You have to design around locations so that these solutions are sustainable. And to do this also, considering that the MDGs actually were not fulfilled in mostly developing nations and third world countries, especially countries in Africa, and for most of the projects that are being conducted, you're working with zero budgets and non-governmental organizations, then there's therefore a need for open geospatial data that can be easily accessed and freely accessed to be used to make effective decisions for these problems that are being faced around the world. So, we're going just to talk about the projects that, as Youth Mappers, we've been participating in. So, Youth Mappers is a global it's an international I'd say, network of chapters across the world that are in universities. As of now, we are 132 chapters in 39 countries. So, and just in the month of October, Youth Mappers were able to contribute 27 million map changes. And what we mostly do is we contribute to data on OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap is a free and open source map of the world. So we basically contribute to this map, especially by mapping remote areas and for marginalized communities, because initially we found out that mostly countries in third world countries have not been represented if you check on common maps like Google Maps, Apple Maps, for most regions you'll just find that it's a blank space. So that's how our work is mostly concentrated around. So we get to work to add data on OpenStreetMap. So other than contributing to data, we also encourage the chapters to consume data. For example, this year there was the Youth Mappers Research Fellowship, where 10 projects were carried out in 10 countries that have chapters. So just to mention a few of the projects that we've worked on, so that are aligned with the SDGs. So on the SDG to attain quality education all across the world, we believe that Youth Mappers achieves this because we get access to resources such as data, software, especially proprietary software, since usually the network makes partnerships with software companies. So we get to have licenses that we would not have had normally. So through this, all these students from countries all over the world get access to quality education, since we are able to use software that we would not have afforded in anyhow. Then we also have worked with an organization in Kenya called Mapkibera Trust. So they have a project called Open Schools Kenya, which is basically they've mapped schools in slums and marginalized communities, and using this data, donors from other countries may be able to support these schools so that most of the students in these regions that are really underrepresented can attend school and get education. Then we've also worked on projects to do with health and well-being, and this is mainly projects by USAID and PEPFAR that are aligned to fight mostly malaria and HIV and AIDS. Then on gender inequality, just from the Youth Mappers network itself, we get to have leadership from both male and female, and they encourage female participation. And also, we've been working really, especially for East African chapters, with an organization called Crowd to Map Tanzania, which uses location data to fight female genital mutilation. And mostly we do this by just contributing the data that then the organization uses on the ground with their field teams. Then on sustainable cities and communities, for our chapters in Tanzania, they work with the humanitarian OpenStreetMap project. It's called Dar Ramani Huria. So this is actually just a project to help with drainage issues and flooding in Tanzania, and also slum mapping projects in all around Africa. So on what you can do so that to achieve sustainable development goals. So basically you can align your work and projects with the SDGs, and that's what we also really try to advocate across the chapters, that for all the projects that the chapter works on, that they should be well aligned with the sustainable development goals. And also what you can also do, you can support youth mappers chapters and other tech hubs around the world through provision of data, research data, and software. Yeah, and that's it. So basically we won't have like the 4-hour-long side event. We just have the presentation because we were to have a panel, but the rest of the team could not make it to the conference. Yes, so if you have any questions, you can ask us. Yeah, then I guess that's it. Thank you so much for coming. If you have any inquiries, you can come to us. We'll just be here for a few minutes before we go to the other side events. Okay.
chairing this session. You know what is the next step.
Okay, no, you were supposed to go from 2 to 4, but then somebody's from okay? So it's just a minute.
You are not chair. You are not chair of this. I am.
Yes.
You are chair. You are a chair.
So the other person is not came. Other.
No, so the side event is on.
This event is over.
Yes, this event is over.
It's over.
Yeah, you should have an announcement. Otherwise, it is a confusion among the people. They were waiting for 10, 15 minutes and they themselves dispersed. You should have informed.
Oh, no. Oh, but before I went, I told them that because some was okay, the event has ended, so they can just go to the other side after the
It was not clear actually. Everybody was asking her, what is next? She was telling the chair,